Have you ever just stopped and wondered how on earth we keep track of our social lives? I mean, all the friends, the family, coworkers, the connections, the drama, it's a lot. Well, it turns out we have a secret weapon, a cultural technology we've been honing for thousands of years: stories. But to really get how that works, we need to ask a kind of strange question first.
So, what could ancient myths, these epic tales from millennia ago, possibly have in common with the latest gossip you heard by the water cooler? I know, they seem like they're from different planets, but they both tap into the exact same cognitive shortcut our brains use to make sense of everyone around us.
To see how, we've got to start with the fundamental problem our brains are constantly trying to solve: the massive cognitive cost of just having a social life. The thing is, our ability to handle all this social complexity, it has a hard limit.
Imagine you're in a group with just a couple of other people, right? Keeping track of who's friends with whom, who's maybe a little annoyed with someone else. It's pretty simple. It really doesn't take much brain power at all.
With 3 people, you've only got 3 one-on-one relationships to keep an eye on. Easy peasy.
But here is the massive catch. As you start adding more people, the mental workload doesn't just add up, it literally explodes. A simple linear increase in the number of people causes this crazy nonlinear spike in the brain power you need.
For example, let's just jump from 3 people to 10. Suddenly, you're not tracking 3 relationships anymore. You're now trying to track 45. That tiny increase in people creates a huge avalanche of social data to process.
And oh, it gets so much more complicated than that. We're not just tracking simple connections. Our brains are constantly running these incredibly complex calculations called higher-order beliefs. This is the mental gymnastics of trying to guess what Sarah thinks about Mike's opinion of Jessica. Just saying it is exhausting, and for our brains, it is unbelievably costly.
So you can see the problem right here on this chart. As the group size gets bigger, the cognitive load just skyrockets. Our brains were simply not built to do this kind of brute force social math. So what gives? How do we cope with this?
Well, we cope by using a shortcut. It's a kind of cultural technology we invented to deal with this very problem: storytelling. We're actually using fiction to solve a very real-world processing limit inside our own heads.
Think about it like this. Our brains have a choice. They can do things the hard way, trying to build a completely unique psychological model for every single person they meet, or they can take the shortcut, applying these familiar, pre-built story templates. For a brain that wants to save energy, it's a no-brainer, right? And that is the absolute key. The stories we consume, from fairy tales when we're kids to the latest streaming series, they aren't just entertainment. They are, in fact, a library of mental shortcuts, a whole collection of patterns our brains can pull from to quickly make sense of new people and new social situations.
Now, the technical term for these shortcuts is interpretive priors, but honestly, a much better way to think about them is as mental blueprints for people. They're these pre-built character templates our brain just keeps on file, ready to go to make these super fast judgments about who someone is and what they're likely to do.
And you know these blueprints like the back of your hand. The self-sacrificing hero, the scheming villain, the wise mentor, the chaotic trickster, the loyal ally. These are the classic roles that stories have given us, all ready to be used out in the real world.
So how exactly does this mental hack work? Well, it's all about making a good enough guess, and there's a surprisingly elegant little algorithm running behind the whole thing.
You see, the brilliant insight here is that for most of our day-to-day lives, our brain doesn't need a perfectly accurate, deeply detailed psychological profile of every single person. It just needs a model that's useful enough to predict their behavior so we can navigate the situation without burning through all our mental fuel.
So, here's how that process breaks down. Step 1, you encounter someone new. Instantly, step 2, your brain recalls its library of story characters. Then, step 3, it finds the best fit template and just kind of overlays it on this new person. And finally, step 4, you use that simplified model to navigate the whole interaction. It's fast, it's efficient, and it's happening almost entirely under the hood.
And believe it or not, there is a scientific name for this very clever process: Variational Bayesian Inference. Yeah, it sounds complicated, but it's really just a formal way of describing what we've been talking about, using a simple, known structure, like a character from a story, to make a really good guess about a complex, unknown reality.
Okay, so this is a neat cognitive trick, right? But why does it really matter? Because this theory uncovers the incredible power of narrative. It shows how stories don't just reflect our reality, they actively help shape it.
It all connects to something called the narrative intelligence hypothesis. This is the big idea that our ability to tell and understand stories didn't just appear out of the blue. It most likely co-evolved right alongside our need to live in larger and larger groups. You could almost say stories were the software update our brains desperately needed.
And this brings us to a really profound point. This quote says that narratives produce virtual realities, which is exactly right. Think about stories as flight simulators for social life. They let us explore all these different personalities, motives, and outcomes, all in a totally safe, low-stakes environment.
So I'll just leave you with this to think about. We've seen how powerful and efficient these narrative shortcuts are. But if our understanding of the people around us is built on these simplified, good enough story templates, what happens when we miscast someone? When our shortcuts, when our stories lead us completely down the wrong path? That's something worth considering.